The steeper the gradient and the larger the pressure differential, the stronger the winds are going to be. Those air mets give an indication about the stability of the atmosphere. It is pretty cold on the surface. Holy moly, and really freaking windy. Hey everybody, welcome back to AeroSafe. My name's Erica Gilbert. I'm a flight instructor in Central Kentucky and an instrument instructor as well. Here on AeroSafe, we do a weather analysis for general aviation pilots. So we're looking at weather from the perspective of someone who's flying a light piston aircraft. We don't have anti-icing or de-icing equipment, and we don't have the ability to get up and above the weather. We're looking at general areas of IFR weather and general areas of VFR weather and discuss some hazards that may exist there. We do all this for a couple reasons. One is for education. If you watch these videos, you should be able to learn how to do your own in-depth weather analysis. Another reason is to help you stay up to date with the weather that's coming across the country. The third goal of the channel is to help you make a more informed go or no-go decision. We use FAA-approved sources of aviation weather to do this weather analysis. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to look at here is the surface analysis chart. Now, from the last video, you should remember that we talked about a low pressure system that had formed up over the western part of Canada. That weather system has since moved across the country. The system is now over central Illinois. We see a millibar pressure low of 988 millibars. That is pretty darn low. What happens when there's super low pressure? Well, the pressure gradient between the highs and the lows becomes higher. And we see that represented by the isobars. There are a whole bunch of isobars very close together, meaning the pressure gradient is huge. And what happens when there's a big pressure gradient? Big winds. Picture for a moment, if you will, a balloon. You blow up the balloon and hold the top closed. So what is the pressure in the balloon relative to the outside? It's high pressure. What happens when you let go of the mouth of the balloon but still hold onto the balloon? All the air whooshes out, right? What's happening there is there's a pressure differential between the inside of the balloon and the outside of the balloon. The inside is high pressure, outside is relatively low pressure. Now that system is wanting to reach homeostasis, or equal pressure throughout. So the high pressure whoosh, moves out to the low pressure. The same thing is happening in our atmosphere. We've got relatively higher pressure outside of these central low pressures. So that air is going to be moving in, and it's going to be moving in quickly. The steeper the gradient and the larger the pressure differential, the stronger the winds are going to be. We also know as pilots that low pressure brings the bad weather, and that's because it's basically sucking in and up like a vacuum, bringing all the crap and crud in. And we see that happening here. These low pressures are also surrounded by many different fronts. We've got stationary fronts, warm fronts, some occluded, cold, more cold and warm fronts. So we've got a whole bunch of different air masses coming together within these central low pressure systems. As we move westerly, things are not so bad. As we move farther west, we see some low pressure systems. It looks like the lowest we have there is 102, some really close together isobars and troughs, elongated areas of low pressure, and some isolated areas of high pressure. So that's our synoptic chart. Let's look at how that practically creates some weather across the country. So now we're looking at the interactive map on flight service. The layers that I currently have on are METARs and TAFs and the radar with base reflectivity. So what that's showing us is the precipitation that is actually making it to the ground and station observations at our different airports. Just taking a brief quick look here, zoomed out, we see, of course, where there's all that precipitation and heavy stuff going on, that really centralized low pressure system, we see lots of IFR, marginal VFR, and low IFR. Far northeastern US looks pretty nice. VFR with no ceilings through a lot of Maine and New York. Florida is not looking great. There are some areas of VFR, but we also see some isolated marginal VFR, IFR, and then low IFR as we move up into Georgia. Now the back end of that low pressure system, things are really not great for a couple hundred miles. We see lots of IFR along the back side of that low pressure system, and then moving north into Minnesota and the Dakotas, some marginal, some IFR, not great. Now, if we look at Kansas down to Texas and west, it looks pretty nice in terms of flight category, right? VFR, IFR, marginal VFR, or low IFR. We see lots of open circles, meaning that there is no ceiling and there are no clouds even. The green means the visibility meets the requirements for VFR. That continues all the way over to Southern California. Then as we move farther north towards those low pressure systems that we looked at earlier on the synoptic chart, we see some precipitation, and along with that, we see some ceilings, some marginal VFR, and some IFR coming in. So overall, areas of VFR would be far northeast, Texas, Four Corners, California, and actually far northwest as well. Looks like this is the first break you guys are getting in a little while from the really, really crummy weather. Areas of IFR would kind of be Florida, Georgia, extending up all the way through the southeast and the central eastern part of the country towards Michigan, Wisconsin, and then we see some IFR Minnesota through Wyoming. And then we also see some IFR through Idaho and Oregon. It looks like the graphical air mets aren't working, so we're gonna look at the air met Zulus. All right, so we've had a lot of cold weather sweep across the US lately. And when you combine the cold weather with the visible moisture, whether it's precipitation or clouds, we do see an air met for icing. We see air mets all across the country here. Large parts of the country have air mets for icing. Now here over the eastern part of the US, that does correlate with that low pressure system and the storms there. So this large air met here says that the freezing level ranges from the surface to 14,500, surface to 11,000, surface to 14,500.
If we look at this freezing chart, it does seem
surface to 11,000,
the freezing level does extend.
So the freezing level there is ranging somewhere between the surface and about 15,000 feet.
So I'd say if you're
that's a really large area.
Moisture,
unfortunately, the graphical air mets aren't loading, so we can't see the freezing level here. We'll look at it in a different place here shortly. Here in Lexington, it is pretty cold on the surface. Holy moly, and really freaking windy. 17024 gusting 49. That is insane. Absolutely well out of my personal minimums in any aircraft. Temperature on the surface is 9 degrees. So if we were to take a standard lapse rate, which is 2 degrees per 1,000 feet, divide 9 by 2, that's 4,500 feet when you get to the freezing level. Surface winds make it a no-go situation, but you add to that an anticipated ice at 4,500. That is not a great deal. That'd be a no-go area for me, absolutely. Chicago, let's see what their temperature is on the ground. 2 degrees, which means at about 1,000 feet above that 1,000 AGL, you'll be in, with a standard lapse rate, you'll be at freezing temperatures or below. So while these air mets do say that the freezing level is somewhere between the surface and 11,000 to 14,500 feet, my guess is that it's probably quite a bit lower. So all of these icing areas for me in an aircraft with no de-icing or anti-icing capability, that's going to be a no-go situation. Let's look now over here, these air met Zulus. Freezing level ranging from surface to 10,000, surface to 12,500, far east coast, surface from 12,500 as well. Now, I do see some places in this air mat that are VFR, so let's look and see what's going on here. Oh my gosh. Again, 250, 25 knots, gusting 32. Out of my personal minimums. So even if there weren't the wind, though, it is overcast at 5,000 AGL. The wind there obviously makes it a no-go situation, but can you stay out of the clouds below the freezing level and stay above terrain, right? That's kind of what we're thinking over in the west here. My guess is that that's not going to be such an easy thing to do. We'll move to Sierra. This is the IFR. We do see mountain obscuration air mets in those same areas where there was freezing and ceilings at 5,000 feet. So depending on the height of the mountains, can you fly IFR, stay out of visible moisture, or if you're in visible moisture, stay below the freezing level and above the clouds? That becomes a really tricky situation. The hazards are building up, the risks are increasing, and ultimately for me, when we look at the Swiss cheese model, if I've got 2 holes lining up, I'm done, I'm staying on the ground. There's not any flight I could possibly take that would be worth not coming home for. So similarly on the East Coast, we've got mountain obscuration across the Appalachians and large swaths of IFR. Now we already decided that's a no-go situation for many reasons. Number one is those crazy high surface winds due to that really low pressure, right? 988 millibars, and the icing. So we add to that the IFR, air mets, and the mountain obscuration. That area is going to be just a no-go. What I'm really interested in looking at today is some air met tangos. So the green air mets are for high turbulence, which as light piston GA pilots doesn't really apply to us. Now the air met tango updates 4 and 6, same area, we've got low and high. Turbulence, strong winds, and low level wind shear. We've talked before about low level wind shear and the dangers there. We'll talk about it again. Typically, low level wind shear becomes an issue when you're at takeoff and landing. When you are landing in particular, your VREF, which is your final approach speed, is 1.3 times VSO, or your stall speed in the landing configuration. And a Cessna 172, it's 65. When they issue the air mets, they tell you the loss or gain can be as much, and I've seen it here today in Lexington, as 40 to 50 knots. If you are at your final approach speed and you lose 40 to 50 knots, in most general aviation aircraft, that's going to put you very close to or below your stall speed in the landing configuration, which means you're going to be landing and touching the ground before you're ready to. We've got low level wind shear, sustained surface winds greater than 30 knots. Same thing over on the East Coast. We've got low level turbulence air mets, we've got high turbulence air mets, we've got low level wind shear, we've got those sustained surface winds of 30 knots or greater. When you turn on your layers and you see that many beautiful colors in one little spot, that should get you thinking about alternate plans. Those air mets give an indication about the stability of the atmosphere. More stable atmosphere, typically speaking, safer conditions. Lots of instability in the atmosphere typically leads to unsafe conditions like turbulence, high winds, convective activity. All that stuff we want to stay away from as general aviation pilots. I'm going to turn on our SIG mets now. We do have SIG mets for low level wind shear and low level turbulence. That means it's a really big deal. The upgrade from air met to SIG met means that it's the kind of conditions that would put anyone in an unsafe condition, no matter the size of their aircraft or capabilities of their aircraft. We also see some convective SIG mets down here in the far southeast. Embedded thunderstorms moving from 240 at 50 knots, tops to flight level 380. Two things there as general aviation pilots to consider. Number one is, can you outrun the thunderstorm? The thing's moving at 50 knots. We should be able to outrun that, especially if we have that tailwind aiding us. If you're trying to move around it, come up in front of it here, probably going to have difficulty outrunning it because the wind's going to be working against you. Another consideration is the top to flight level 380. Obviously, a piston engine aircraft cannot go that high, let alone the aeromedical factors there and the need for oxygen. That's not going to work. I'd stay far away from the southeast today. Let's look at the surface prog chart for tomorrow. It looks like they're predicting that that low pressure is actually going to gain in strength. I see 972 millibars here. that is even lower than it is now. We can expect very, very, very strong winds up here in the far northeast. Being that those low pressure systems are moving up, the precipitation, the low ceilings are going to move up with it. Highly likely chance of snow and then also precipitation along the coast. Out in the west and along the western coast, looks like they're just kind of hanging out there for tomorrow. They're not really going to come in very much. My guess is that this far southeast is actually going to clear up and be pretty nice. Tomorrow, there may be some lingering clouds on the backside of these low pressures and these fronts. That remains to be seen. If we look 2 days out on the surface prog chart, that low pressure system is predicted to have lost a little strength and moved up over Canada. And then we see this cold front that has really brought in a lot of really cold air. I do know here in central Kentucky, it's predicted to be in the teens next week, and this would be the reason why. That continental polar air is pushing down and through, and it's going to be chilly. Those low pressures are still going to be hanging out over Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, bringing some yucky stuff, precipitation, snow, not looking good. So in the next couple of days, we could expect the southeast and the Midwest to clear up. There's going to be some more precipitation, some more low ceilings in the meantime, some more icing conditions, lots of strong wind up in the northeast tomorrow as that low pressure is predicted to get stronger. So as this big low pressure system moves east and north, it's going to take a lot of the crap that we're experiencing here in Kentucky with it, which is high surface winds, low ceilings, lots of precipitation, and icing conditions. These low pressure systems out here in the west, they are on a stationary front, right? There's not a lot of movement going on. It looks like they're going to be hanging out there for the next couple days, bringing more precipitation and yuck. Midwest and the southeast do look like they're going to be clearing up here in the next couple days. So maybe this weekend you'll be able to get some flying in if you're in there. In the northeast and the far west, and it's going to be, on a really centralized basis on whether or not you'll be able to go flying. Thank you so much for tuning in today to AeroSafe. We're moving towards better education and more information to help pilots and their passengers stay safe, and you're playing a vital role there by watching. If you're interested in getting an AeroSafe sticker, answer this question in the comments below. What have you done in the past 30 days to make yourself a better, more proficient, and more informed pilot? If you comment below, I'll respond and get your contact information and send you a letter and some stickers. Thank you again so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye.